Welcome back folks and welcome to new Dragons Dogma 2 video. So today we're gonna be talking more about vocations, what they are, how many do you have, what do you use them for, and its pros and cons, because I noticed that there are a lot of new people who are just now getting into this game, and because Dragons Dogma 2 is around the corner, I'm going to use this video to bring it all closer together and kinda explain to you what you should expect if you never play this game. If you already played Dragons Dogma, then you know what I'm going to talk about. So we already have seen some of the trailers which Capcom did release on their channel, so those are going to be for the 4 starting vocations in Dragons Dogma 2, and that's going to be Fighter, Archer, Thief, and Mage. So when it comes to Dragon's Dogma, you have to imagine vocations as classes basically. So at the start of the game, you're gonna be choosing between one of these 4 vocations, these 4 classes. Now do keep in mind, as they said, there's going to be other vocations, yes. Once you get into the game and you start leveling up, and for example, I believe it's going to be the same as in Dragon's Dogma 1, so after you are level 10, maybe you're gonna be able to change that vocation. So yes, it doesn't matter like in other RPGs, let's say you create a warrior and you have to stick with that warrior until the end. No, that's not going to be the case in this game, because you can change all of that to see like which playstyle fits you the better. Now in Dragon's Dogma 1, or well, Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, you had a few vocations, and those are Fighter, Strider, Mage, Warrior, Ranger, Sorcerer, Mystic Knight, Assassin, and Magic Archer. So these are going to be the vocations you have in the first game, and these are the ones you can play as. I personally started with a Fighter, ended up with a Magic Archer, because for me Magic Archer was always one of the coolest classes out there. And the reason for it is that it's going to be a hybrid class, so this is basically how it goes. So first off, you have basic vocations, which in Dragon's Dogma 1 were, as I said, Fighter, Strider, and Mage, so those are going to be those basic ones. The advanced vocations you can unlock later, obviously, or well, if you want at the start of the game, are going to be Warrior, Ranger, and Sorcerer. And the hybrid vocation, which you unlock obviously later on after level 10, is going to be, like I mentioned, Mystic Knight, Assassin, and a Magic Archer. So what's the difference? Well, first off, it depends on your playstyle. Keep in mind that each vocation in Dragon's Dogma has its plus and minuses. So for example, as a fighter, your job is somewhat to control the battlefield itself, because you have a sword and you have a shield. So you're not going to be really the person who's going to be shooting at a monster from afar. You have to go within the combat and control the flow of that combat, so you protect your enemies. So you probably noticed in this Dragon's Dogma 2 video that he also starts hitting his shield. This is an ability which Fighter has, which basically tells all of the monsters around them, attack me. So it's somewhat of a taunt for other enemies. That means that enemies are going to, well, have a higher chance of attacking you and leaving your friends, you know, at rest, so they can start shooting back. This is good because, well, Fighter has a shield and is much easier for them to fight all of those things together if you have a shield who's going to protect you, and at the same time you have other abilities which are going to be very much of a controlling nature, because you will have knockback, you will have stun, etc, etc. Now the next vocation being an Archer. So Archer is going to be a lot more mobile. Obviously you have a bow and arrow, so you're automatically able to shoot from afar. And the thing with Dragon's Dogma in general, if you always wanted to play an Archer, like for example Legolas in Lord of the Rings, with all of those cool attacks and everything, like the mobility which you don't really get in a lot of RPG games playing as an archer, well, that's going to be it. This is going to be the game if you want to roleplay that fantasy. And as you've seen in the gameplay, they are a lot more mobile, and they're gonna be using that bow and arrow to stun enemies at the same time, because, well, you control where does that bow hit. So if that bow hits, like for example a Cyclops in the head multiple times, it's going to be good because you're going to stun them. They might actually fall down as well, which is going to allow your team to start attacking that monster even more. Then they also showed a Thief, and that's going to be your standard rogue assassin type, but keep in mind there are other sub-vocations later on which you can unlock, which are tied to daggers as well. So the Thief is going to be a lot faster, and one of the good things about a Thief is that because you are pretty light when it comes to the armor, you will be able to grapple and go on top of a monster, and that's going to be somewhat your playstyle in general. So yes, in this game you can grab various monsters, you grab them, you can hold them, you can climb on top of them, and you can attack them from there. You actually have to do that because you have to reach certain weak spots, because attacking an enemy in their armor is not going to do anything. You have to go to the limbs, you have to go to the head, and those are the keys, because you will be incredibly fast when you are actually scaling those monsters, and at the same time, with a flurry of dagger attacks, you're gonna be dealing like constant high damage to someone. And at the end we have a mage. So the mage is going to be your classical magical user, and again, if you never played Dragons Dogma, you have to understand that magic in this game, especially later on once you unlock more and more as a sorcerer for example, you're gonna be having some insanely cool looking abilities, something which you don't really get in any other RPGs, especially when it comes to magic systems. Now keep in mind, from the concept of Dragon's Dogma, mages are more of a support unit, so your mage, at least how it was in the original game, is going to have those attack abilities, but they're also going to have a lot of defensive abilities, so that means either silencing enemies, healing you, buffing you up, giving your weapons various elements, like for example fire or electricity, and by them giving you those buffs on your weapons, you're gonna be obviously dealing a lot more damage because you have another element on your weapon which is attacking someone. But a sorcerer, for another example, is going to be that high damage magical user. So sorcerers are not really healing types, they're not support types, they are attacking types. It takes a bit longer for their abilities to cast sometimes, but it's good because those abilities are gonna be dealing insane amounts of damage. Now personally, I always like to take a mage with me because, well, I get some free healing, but having a sorcerer as well is pretty okay. Now later on they also talked about more vocation, more advanced ones, like for example the warrior one, which is going to have a two-handed weapon. Those are really going to be those guts fantasies, like if you want to be like a two-hander berserker basically, you can do that because that two-hander is going to be pretty much cleaving through enemies. That also comes with a sorcerer as well, because you're gonna be dealing that high magical damage itself. Now, as it was with Dragon's Dogma 1 and it's going to be with Dragon's Dogma 2, you had hybrid vocations. That vocation basically means that your character is not only going to be physical damage, but they're also going to do, let's say, magical damage. So the class that I play with, Magic Archer, allows me for two things. I can either take a staff and do some sorts of, like, you know, various magical attacks and have a bow at the same time, or I can go and have a dagger, for example, two daggers and a bow. All of my attacks, or most of my attacks, are going to be of a magical nature, so the arrows I fire are not going to be the same arrows that ranger or an archer fires, because, well, you know, I'm going to use magic from an actual, like, physical items. And that's also a class that I like to play a lot. Now, do keep in mind that generally, like, those hybrid classes can be very strong, especially and depending on which experience you want, but at the same time, like, they are a lot of fun. And that's also what it says here, like, you have the Magic Archer, Mystic Spearhand, so I do think that, of course, you know, next to Magic Archer, Mystic Spearhand is going to be somewhat of that hybrid class, maybe something close to Mystic Knight from, you know, Dragon's Dogma 1. And you also have a Trickster, which is most likely going to be that combination of a thief, maybe some magical abilities here and there we shall see at the end once, you know, the game is actually out. Now, I'm pretty sure these are not all of the vocations we're going to have. I'm pretty sure they added a bit more, which we are going to reveal as we unlock more throughout the game, and I'm really excited to see what it was. So as you're playing the game, you're going to have two things. You're going to have the level of your character and you're going to have vocation rank. As you level up your character and as you level up your vocations, you're gonna be able to buy different abilities. Those abilities are going to be first upgrades to other abilities, unlocking more stuff, and at the same time they're going to be giving you various other things. So for example, you're going to be changing up those abilities depending on the mission or adventure you are on. And this is a general thing when it comes to vocations in this game, is that you're going to be changing your abilities, as I said, depending on that mission. So for example, Some enemies are more susceptible to fire, so you're gonna be using some abilities which, let's say, have that fire. Or maybe you can stun some enemies easier, or maybe it's better that you have an ability which is going to attack multiple enemies at one time, or you want more supporting abilities which are going to lock enemies in place, or that's going to draw them into one place you can attack, etc, etc. So you will be unlocking them and changing them from time to time. And as I said, when it comes to changing vocations, that was pretty easy in the original games. You just talk to a guy pretty much and you say, I want to change my vocation. You pay some discipline points and that's it. You have a new vocation. The only difference is that obviously you have to change the weapons, you have to change some of the armor, because for every class, well, you're gonna be having different stuff. So once you go into the game, it's really not a problem if you want to change it up, if you get tired of one thing and you want to buy something else, or well, change the vocation. That's always going to be the case, and that's also something which I do recommend. Now, of course, if you do stick to a certain vocation, and if you level it up, you're gonna be getting certain augmentations and various different buffs which actually stay with different vocations in general, so they're not going to be reset, and that's always good because you get some extra buffs as a character regardless of the vocation you are playing as. And I know some people are worried, for example, saying like, oh, so if I choose a fighter, is that going to be more difficult later on once I start fighting enemies which are basically flying in the air? How will I get them if I don't have a bow? Well, it depends, you know, some vocations are better than, you know, some are worse. It really depends which enemies you're fighting and what your squad is actually, you know, looking like. So it's always the best to have, when it comes to your pawns, which is a story for a different video, is have a more diverse group, so that you will have a mage, you will have an archer, and you will have someone who's going to be wielding that big ass sword. So it's just how it is. But of course, there will be a more detailed video once Dragons Dogma 2 comes out, and once we actually get to play those vocations and once I test them out. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click that like and subscribe button for more, because I will be covering Dragons Dogma 2 a lot when it comes out, because I really do like this game. Also, huge thanks to my current Patreon supporters, and that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon in a new one. Bye bye.